Hello, this is George Sandmann. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. And Growth Drive is a system used by business advisors to drive client profits, growth, and value. Now, we're also a community. Every week we get together to talk about all things business advisor, everything clients, cases, things we're seeing out in the world. Now, tune in here to this podcast, and you can join the conversation by scanning this QR code, passcode 867-5309. Jump into the conversation. Everyone's welcome. We're looking forward to having you. So here we go. On with the show.
Oh, kids, what's on everyone's mind this morning? Joe, Joe's hiding. What's on everyone's mind this morning?
I'll give you a heads up. Joe's in the car driving to Cleveland. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
And Tim is going to join. Tim Rohde is going to join also by audio. He's driving. I think he's driving from South Carolina back up to Deepwater, Maryland. Go ahead.
Anybody else tired of bad value advisors messing up clients' deals?
Mike, explain more.
Morning, Eric.
Morning.
Next week's the start of the EPI Summit. I'm going down there. Part of the program is to collaborate. Now, these aren't growth drivers for various reasons, but collaborating with these value advisors, one of them turned out to be a competitor of his that didn't disclose it. So that was problem number one. He found out in the face-to-face meeting with the client that the person had a securities license and was there to take all the M&A business away from Merrill Lynch. So that was a problem. And then both value advisors actually didn't know enough about, shall we say, client life cycle to understand that the client was interested in an immediate exit if possible. And so signed up both clients to retainer-based programs to drive value, when in reality, it wasn't the right fit for a value advisor. There should have been an M&A person or investment banker in there. So how's that?
Wow. I'm like, how many tripwires? So the claymores are popping. And would anyone care to comment?
but I think that's what I find when I talk to, some of those SEPA people. They're kind of wandering around thinking that because they've gone through the course, they're now capably skilled to do everything. And I think the reality is they have no capabilities. They have a knowledge. That's all.
They can talk about it, but they can't really do anything. That's a great observation, Ed. And we hear that chronically about that people learn a lot and become quite knowledgeable, and they're not sophomoric. There isn't a, okay, now here's how we're going to do it. Now that how comes from other sources. I'm also struck by the failure of discovery, the failure of and I'm going to I'll use the word failure, right? The failure of those people to perform adequate discovery, to really ask questions, to get at the client's intent. Two, clearly the failure to educate the client, not just talk, but educate the client. The failure to understand the immortal relationship that the wealth advisor has with that business owning client, coupled with the incredible value, exponentially larger in terms of dollars, that the client has to the wealth advisor than they do to the growth advisor, value advisor. Those just come to mind pretty quickly. Not that the value advisor doesn't play a critical role, because the typical wealth advisor doesn't, wants to be at the table, but doesn't want to and often cannot participate. They're just a few initial observations. What a bug show, Mike. So
yeah, I because it came up in like a troubleshooting. We were doing an accountability call about where's everybody at on results. And I basically discovered that no one in the program, and my concept of the timeline around transferable value and then transitioning to trying to access that transferable value, that they were following a process of get a value advisor, get on retainer, get the wealth gap, value gap, profit gap, that whole thing. When, as I explained on the call to Ed's point, I was like, no, the only thing I would have done in your position was found somebody who was an M&A specialist that had buyers for each of those individual client types of businesses. That would have been where I would have gone, I'm sure, discovery, looking back on it. Does anybody have, or do we have in C3D, I'm not finished, do we have like a timeline hierarchy of the different professionals? And if you do discovery and discover your client is 12 months and under to exit, you're going to bring in these people. Do we have something like that?
So that's an interesting question, and I'll take the first stab at the answer as the guy in charge of C3D. There isn't a timeline, Mike, because every case, it's case dependent. But what we do discuss inside C3D is, okay, here are the advisors with whom you're likely to collaborate. You're likely to collaborate with an attorney, attorneys, accountants, bankers, probably fractional CFO. There's a lot of work that the typical company is going to need. So a partial yes, but I believe firmly, and please shoot me down, guys. I'm always happy to amend.
Hey, George.
Mike.
What I'm looking for is like a documentation of, and I'm going to end up doing this on my own, but I'd love to collaborate and give credit to other people if it's already done. But I'm literally going to say, okay, here are the different scenarios when you do discovery with a client where you're going to bring in the following professionals. Look for these things. And if your client is late stage, don't bring in a value advisor, or at least not one that's a generalist. You need to bring in someone who's there. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, is like, here are the different professions, here are where they interact with on the timeline of driving growth and then transformable.
And Mike, I'm going to push back a little bit. I am on record as saying I hate the term value advisor. That's just my personal thing. But let's just center around advisor. I'll get my prejudices out of the way. I would put, my only pushback would be that if we bring in someone like most of all of you on this call, we need someone who's going to facilitate this. If it's going to be successful and relatively quickly, the client is incredibly well served by having a facilitator who is typically a business advisor, right? Someone who's going to facilitate. Think about all of the pieces that have to be lined up at the same point on the horizon, and who is going to ride herd and co-pilot, co-drive this process with the CEO. And that's the only pushback I'd give you. Bringing in someone to grow value at this point, I'm 100%, man. It's too late to suffocate. Yeah,
I agree. Like if this was an open format, it'd have been, oh, we're going to bring in Ed, or we're going to bring in Larry. But this particular format, I didn't have the, shall we say, resources to do so for other reasons. But like, I'm totally, I don't think that's pushback. I think there's just a clarification of roles, because, that's absolutely what I would recommend the client do. It's like, no, you don't need someone to come in that is going to be a generalist and kind of work in a program. What you need is somebody with experience who's been involved in deals that close successfully that can help you handle this process. Here's what I recommend.
Yeah,
it would have been great.
Mike, Eric here, just as an example of this exact, your exact scenario. In 2021, I met a client in January, started working for them. 12 months later, in December of 21, they closed the deal, and I like literally closing, like they signed the docs and it was done. And in that time, we added, on one item in the transaction, we added over $500,000 of value on that one item, plus a bunch of other stuff that we did for them, prepping for due diligence, aligning the buyer's expectations on what was going on. And by the way, they, at our advice, had an investment banker representing them on the selling side, because they needed that, because the buyer had an investment banker on their side, and we didn't want to get caught up in all of that stuff. So to your point, Mike, and I know this is what you're saying, for the right advisor, there's lots of things to do to move the needle in that under a year time frame, to help facilitate it, get it done and actually deliver value.
And Eric, what I think I'm hearing, and I love that you brought the value. A lot of the value you brought was not only in setting proper expectations, but in also driving a bunch of risk. I'll call it the cheap risk, but it's really the most rewarding risk out of the deal. Like, hey man, if we get these things together, it's going to go a lot better in due diligence. Do I hear you correctly?
Yeah, in this particular instance, just again, in the sharing so that we can understand, in this particular instance, what the seller wasn't thinking about is they had just renegotiated their two largest customers under contract. They did not they were going to sell to the buyer at their historical earnings rate. And we argued strongly, and the seller started to understand that they needed to reset the expectation because gross margin was going to change under these new. And so we calculated what the value of these new contracts were for them and actually factored that into the price, and it changed the price by over $500,000.
Nice.
Just that one item, in addition to all the due diligence and general risk reduction of getting everything ready so that we could explain everything, making sure that the balance sheet was as clean as we could get it in 6 months of work, and all the other general stuff that you're alluding to. But there were specific things, and that's why each situation is unique. You got to look at the situation and understand what the business problem is, and is there value that you can, and what's the value that you can add to that process.
Yeah, I think I can echo that in the one I did. I had almost a year and a half to 2 years to work on it, and I redefined the market strategy, and we got them to, it was a landscape design build company in Virginia, and I got them to drop bidding jobs under $100,000. And it increased the margin and profitability of the business such that it went from 2.5 million to an 8 million transaction in 2 years.
Yeah. So,
Hey, Eric, just to jump in, going back, Mike, to your original challenge, I would hope that in our community, that's the exception, not the rule, that we're well trained in George, to your point, a deeper discovery, and not the sense that you own everything just because you show up. That through the deep discovery, you realize, okay, the client needs are not where I align in my vertical or lane, whether it's value builder or growth building. Too, I think that's important in case, George, there's anyone new, that we understand that a part of our values in this community is that it's what's best for the client and where they're at and what their needs are. And if any one of us discovers something that doesn't fit our lane, that we have a community of people, Mike, to your point, to tap into that could fit right in. I got certified in that boot camp last year by BE&I on exit planning, small certification. But by no means do I believe, it's like a general practitioner in medicine believing because they took a course in surgery for a summer that they could do surgery. I could not do the surgery on exit planning.
I absolutely could do surgery. Give me a dull knife and a hacksaw, and I can take care of any of your problems.
And the point is that knowledge is important to round off our knowledge in all areas.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we have the capability to do what's right for the client.
Well, and I think it was Ed who made the point. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge, the application of knowledge is wisdom, right? Just having the knowledge is not enough to win the day.
No, I think you hit it right on the head, Eric. I mean, I think that's the problem. Some of the people that have gone through that CEPA program thinks because they got a credential, they can walk on water. And I mean, I went through the program way back in 2012. And all of us that were in the class, there were 3 of us that were all CPAs and have been out for over 30 years. And we all sat there and said, well, we know we can't do all these things, and we've got to have an expert that deals with certain parts. And we all concluded, when you need an investment banker, step back, you support what they need, documentation and preparing for a transaction, but let the investment banker deal with taking the business to the market.
And he said, shamefully plugging, clarity surfaces potential due diligence strengths and landmines, right? What we call deal killers. So thank you, Ed.
Yeah, I'd like to speak up in defense of generalists. In general, there's nothing wrong with a generalist as long as they're astute enough and self-aware enough to know what they don't know. The generalist may know all the questions to ask, even if they don't have all the answers. So if they're astute enough to know when they ought to ask for some help, then life is good.
Steve, I love that point.
I agree.
What you're underscoring is the culture that people self-identify into this community, right? And our culture is exactly what you just described. You know what? I may not know. And I think everyone on this call views the world through a lens of abundance. And Mike, how might this help build stronger?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. You ready? So in this case, we had exits that clients wanted to execute with a combined value of over 175 million that are now at risk. One like the client relationship, the financial advisor and the client are good. He's very good at what he does. And so he managed to, execute his insurance policy and get the car back on the road. But the exits are all jacked up now. And that's serious revenue. I mean, there's a serious amount of annual revenue that would have been coming to my financial advisor client. And I embrace the generalist thing because I could be called a generalist when it comes to exit planning as well. I'm very specific with certain people, but it's just like knowing your road, kind of what Larry was saying, Ed saying, Eric saying is these financial advisors are such an untapped resource for referrals, but they're so vulnerable because they're like realtors. Like they don't get paid until everything's done, and they get some money along the way, and Clarity really helps with that. Thank you, George. But it's just so frustrating to see people, and I'm not bashing SEPA, by the way. I'm a happy person. But like, I was very much like Ed. When I took SEPA, I was like, oh, crap. Okay, well, I can do this, and that's it. And I instinctively contextualized and compartmentalized what I would be doing, and then started looking to collaborate. Hence the relationship I developed with George, and then most of you on the call as well. So that's what I was hitting.
Yeah, none of this reflects poorly on SEPA. It's an excellent designation. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the points that multiple people have made. I think it goes back to your approach to how you're going to do things. There are people who take a certification, or for that matter, Mike, we could turn this around. You and I were just talking about this yesterday. There are going to be people who read your book and think they're experts on referral programs, right? I don't know why it picks up my thumbs. I got to keep my thumbs out of the thing or I get a thumbs up. And there are people who are going to read your book and think they're now an expert on referral programs. And that's not how things work. You don't just read something or take a certification and become an expert. The whole point is, and I love your description of Ed, because I had the same experience. I had nearly 30 years of working for Fortune 100 companies all the way down to tiny little companies, traveling all over the world, seeing lots of different things. And then I sat in SEPA class and I'm like, yeah, that's really interesting. Now I understand how that connects to that. And now I see why I don't want to do the plumbing part, because the plumbing part is like, I got to remember to do all that stuff. And I just don't want to do that. Right. And I'll do the electrical part, but I'm not doing the plumbing part. How we should learn, that's how we should see the world. But the problem is there are too many people out there who say, I read something, so now I'm an expert on it, or I listened to something, or I watched a podcast, right? And that's the problem. It's not the certification that's the problem, George. You're absolutely right. It's the attitude towards how I learn and how I apply it. Again, Steve, I couldn't agree with you more. I have deep expertise in finance, a CPA certificate and 30 years of finance stuff that, backs that up. But I also consider myself a generalist. I get out into other areas that I know a little bit about, but I'm doing it to funnel it into the things I keep saying to people. I've been selling for 16 years ever since I started my company, but I would never give people deep advice on selling because I learned it all from seat of the pants. I want Mike or somebody who's got deep selling experience to give them selling experience. I know how to ask the right questions in that area because I've done it, but I'm not going to be the one who's going to give them the deep, to use Ed's, I'm not going to do the surgery on it. I might diagnose it, but I'm not going to do the surgery.
I love that, Eric, because what you've just described is the Growth Drive methodology has OKRs, and the objective is to have a sales process with its support and key results that indicate that we're there. It's one thing to say, do you have a sales process that's used by all? It's another to say, and I'm going to help you create and install a sales process.
And here's what excellence looks like in sales. Here's best practices in sales. That's what I'm not qualified to do. I know that. I don't know what best practices are. I know it when I see it, but I don't know how to articulate best practices off the top of my head.
Absolutely. That's why SMEs are so critical. Steve.
Well,
Go ahead.
fortunately, there are words from a very famous person, Dirty Harry. A man's got to, or a woman's got to recognize their limitations.
Yes, I love that.
I love that. Awesome.
And then he blew
Do
their
you
heads
feel
off
lucky?
several people.
Yeah. You feel lucky. That's right. That was a great one, Steve. Thank you.
Well, it actually fits here, and that is the key point.
That's part of, again, things that we see in this community. It's that vulnerability. It's like, I don't know. And I'm going to help you figure it out. That's very different than, yeah, no, I can definitely do that. And then going off and trying to teach her, which can happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would tell you the one thing that I'm keying in on big time in the mentoring and coaching I'm doing with people that are wanting to collaborate with financial advisors is, are you building the confidence of that financial advisor in the entire process? Does this highlight, because they're the surgeons, right? Does that surgeon believe that you're going to do a great job with everything else? It's really unfortunate because it's hard to vet outside of the Growth Drive community. It's hard to vet.
Amen, brother. That's why we created the C3D, which I think essentially everyone on this call is participating in, or everyone on this call. And the path to mastery. It's like, okay, well, I know that you're certified in 3 dimensions of growth, so I understand your methodology and process. Cool. As a wealth advisor, you have earned, I see that you've earned 250 points on a path to mastery. That may not come into the conversation, but that's out there and tangible. And you've submitted X and Y cases, and you've done this work and put on these workshops, and you've done all these things to demonstrate that's going to increase it's quality assurance, right? Heck yes, Mike. And what I love about this, one of the many things I love about this conversation, it's super animated this morning, is this critical collaboration between wealth advisors and you, right? Because I don't have a wealth advisor on the call, right? Between wealth advisors and you, and coming into that relationship, understanding, Mike, the rules of the road and how to be a safe driver, with everyone working to deliver the client's intended result. Okay.
A little bit of pushback. You do have a wealth advisor on the call. It's not active. It's fully licensed and manage 130 of them.
He's on this call right now.
That's me.
Wasn't that Mike? All right.
You make a good point, Mike. I apologize. With all respect, I just don't think I think of you as in so much bigger terms. Teresa, go ahead.
No, I was just pointing out, I think he's talking about Mr. Garrison himself.
Mr. Garrison.
I had observation, and I'm curious that 84% that we refer to as the deals don't go forward. And we all kind of say, oh, we didn't meet owners' expectations. Well, maybe we had the wrong horses together. And I wonder what percentage is really related to not having the right team together and not the owner's expectations not being met.
Or properly. A great point. Thank you.
I'm just amazed at how much respect Teresa shows to Mike. I would never think to call him Mr. Garrison.
I'm going to get in trouble for that in a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's because I'm older. It's age hatred.
It's eight. She's
Not hatred.
She's recognizing that he's a senior person to her. That's all.
Hey, what I'll say about Mike, the coaching, and I'm not promoting today, we're just collaborating here. The vulnerability is real. I'm fatigued from vulnerability, as you guys know. But I think vulnerability is a huge word right now. I've looked at my vetting process, and my eyes are wide open and fearful even without doing this within our community. And Mike warned me about this when I first met him. And, I've just been a business person out there, like whoever just mentioned it, flying all over the world, globally doing business, internationally doing business. But the vulnerability in the United States and the vulnerability right now for our profession, like I even carry professional liability insurance, and I just looked at it totally different. And this community, by the grace of God, I'm thankful for it. I will reiterate that to George, Mike, Ed, and others that have got to know in this community professionally and mentoring me and coaching me, vulnerability. It's at its finest and its sharpest. And I'm pretty savvy, and it's extremely savvy that I didn't even see some of this till recently. So I can't emphasize it enough that iron sharpens iron here, and
Yeah.
we got to be sharp.
Teresa, are you
Thank you.
referring to yourself or what you're experiencing throughout the community?
Me personally in the community, me doing business outside of this community, I don't want it. I don't want anything to do with it. Mike does a great job in his book of referrals. When I understand referrals, I've understood it for decades in business. This is a different. The referrals have to be vetted through our processes, our community, our systems, and these relationships, or we're really vulnerable and at risk.
Yeah.
I just had that. So
Yeah. Vulnerability is a two-edged sword. Yeah. You're that point, Teresa, that, you know, there's vulnerability, there's being emotionally vulnerable, and then being vulnerable from the outside world, vulnerable to,
the threats.
you know, vulnerability in terms of emotional vulnerability, which people in this community tend to exhibit, right? That's what we attract. An incredibly powerful qualifier as we're talking to clients, to prospects, and assessing their vulnerability and their willingness to share. I mean, the growth conversation works like a charm because it helps people really share, really be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think, George, I'd just tack onto that. What I use as a huge sign of whether I want to work with somebody is whether I can get them quickly to be fairly transparent with me. If they can't, if I start asking questions and everything seems like it's a, you know, they're telling a story around it and it's very off-putting and murky, then you know, I don't want to work with them. If they can show some willingness, you know, it's embarrassing to hang out your dirty laundry, right? We all get that. But at some point you gotta be able to build up some trust and get them to hang that dirty laundry out a little bit. And once they do, and there's that transparency, that shows that you're probably in the right relationship. If you can't see that, if that's not happening at all, or there's just a constant pushback on everything, then you're probably working with the wrong person.
Eric, to jump in a little bit, to extend that you led originally, Teresa, being open and vulnerable to just share it. It's based on earning trust. You don't get vulnerability without there feeling a sense of trust. And I think that's what you're building in this community, Teresa, is that trust. And that's one of the hallmarks of this community is that we trust each other. And Eric, going back to your thoughts, my expression is there is going to be no change when we're in the discovery process or even starting with a client until we discover the emotion that is underpinning what that business owner or CEO is feeling, experiencing.
Yes.
And so a lot of our discovery questions involve thought questions. They're intellectual. And what we have to do is switch. Maybe we begin there, but we have to switch off to how's that make you feel? What's the impact that's having on you personally, on your relationships with people, on your time, on your legacy, on the goals you want to achieve with your family and personally, on direct bottom line, and not just thoughts on it. How's that feel? How long has that feeling existed?
How strong is that feeling?
Right. How deeply, how strongly? What would it be like if you didn't make change? How would that feel if you did make change? We do not get change without feeling. We don't get the open conversation without some establishing quickly of trust.
Yes.
And so it's and George, I don't remember, you held up the playbook, which is that chapter 5. I know it's changed.
It is
5 on the discovery conversation. Review it. And if it's not there, add those emotional questions to uncover the emotion, vulnerability.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And it is, and Larry, you know, during C3D, Larry carries the weight on several of the classes. Larry, I know emotion is one of your, and I talk about it all the time. It's in my book. It's in the playbook in tab 5, the growth conversation. I mean, that is a fat tab on the growth conversation. Scripts, things to think about, how to prepare. And we get into it in class 15, which is on facilitation. But at facilitation, it's all about understanding, preparing, and having the factual and emotional basis for the meeting, whether it's a one-on-one or one to many? Heck yes.
I'd like to defend facts before we even get to emotion.
Who cares about facts? Don't trouble us.
I mean, when we're talking to a potential client, we need to get facts. I mean, what would it be like if you went to see your doctor or your therapist and you sat there like a rock? How could the therapist or the doctor help you? Probably not so much. And we can't help, a business owner unless we get to the facts. And once we get to the facts, then we can start chasing into the emotions and the.
Well, I did say
What's
that.
really going on?
If you don't mind to defend a little bit, I said you begin with those thinking questions. You have to uncover the facts, but the turning it into an opportunity is then taking those facts and turning it into an emotion and those feeling questions. So I do agree with you, Steve. It's not one or the other at all.
Yeah, I'm not trying to disagree.
To me, it sounded like you guys were saying the same thing. We make the point that emotion is the fuel that supports execution, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Emotion is not only in our client, but we need to understand and harness the emotions of the senior leadership team and ultimately culturally of the entire organization. But the emotional fuel of our client and the emotions that are at play in the SLT. And no one's being trained to be a psychologist here, but we're all smart enough and adept enough to ask questions about, to ask some critical questions. I wish Barry was on today. He does very, very focused and deep discovery on each individual at the team. Does that resonate? Yeah. Eric, you've been doing exit planning for a very long time. Is that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the point that's been made. Larry and I see that world very much the same way. I'm trained as an accountant and a CPA, so I do go find the facts, to Steve's point and Larry's point. But what tends to get people, they often get bored with the facts very quickly. They'll tell you the facts and then there's nothing that happens beyond that. And when you get them engaged in the emotions of the conversation and get them talking about that, that's when they tend to get animated in a discussion. That's when they tend to say, yeah, I want to be able to go and enjoy my vacations more, and I can't enjoy them now. I sit on my vacations and worry about my business. Okay, that's not good. Like, let's fix that, right?
Heck yes. And I think the point, Steve, if I understood your point correctly, it is that, you're getting into the facts, but you weren't, maybe in the context of the conversation, that you were referring not so much to the the zeros and ones as it was to, okay, listen, man, what's really going on? What really needs to happen?
Yeah, you got to dig a couple layers. You got to peel the onion for sure.
Oh,
right.
The 7 layers of why.
Well, I always use the analogy when you walk into the doctor's office, some people come in and say, give me this pill. I need this pill because I've read all the stuff about it and you got to give me this pill. And if I'm the doctor, I'm saying, well, let's back up a little bit and you tell me the story of how you got here. Because I want to make sure you got all the decisions right. Because, I did go to medical school and I learned a couple things, right? But the other half of it is, and I learned this from my dad who was a doctor, most people can only tell you the symptoms. They're making their decisions off of symptoms. They're not making their decisions off of the real root cause, right? I'm coughing, therefore I need X, right? Coughing is a symptom. Do you have a cold? Do you have pneumonia? Do you have AIDS? Do you have, what do you have? Like, we can't fix the coughing until we understand what the underlying condition is. And we often don't. And again, this is what I love about clarity. We all understand this. You got to peel the onion back and find out what that symptom that you're talking about, what's that underlying, lying cause. And oftentimes it's more complex than one thing. Not only do you have pneumonia, but you also have cancer, and we got to treat both the cancer and the pneumonia, and we got to get you better, right? And so it's not as easy as just walk in and ask for the cough medicine or ask for the antibiotics. It's, you got to understand what's really going on and the interaction of those things, and how do we untangle it and fix it. And I think in the marketplace, we're way too, not we on this call, but in general, society is way too lazy, and we and we get out our duct tape and our baling wire and we patch everything so we can move on, and we don't do the hard work of actually finding out what the root cause is and fixing it, the firefighter better put out the actual end of the fire so the fire doesn't start again.
You know, Eric, you just hit on a sin. Well, I call it a sin. I'm not a religious, but I just don't have a better word. And there are a few that we describe, and we talk about them. Maybe not this one, but we talk about them in the C3D, and there aren't a lot. But one of the sins is you sit down with a business owner. And Mike, it sounds like this is the sin that was committed in the case you started us off with. You sit down, you're like, what's going on? I need to get my business value to 20 million. Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. Bing, 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 bing. And they haven't, dude, you don't understand the context of the goal. You don't understand what's driving that goal. You don't even understand if that's the right goal. You don't understand what's going on. And I've had this done. I just had this done to me the other day. A guy who had literally not even been to our website started telling me what I should be doing with the business. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And that's a sin. And I don't have a name for it. But it's kind of related to L. David Marquette's listening to refute. You know, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I'm really good. I'm really good at growing profits. I'm really good. Okay, here's how we're going to grow profits. And whatever you've just said goes through the context of what I bring to the table, my silo, my SME. Does that resonate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a sin, man.
Yeah, I would say I call it a car wreck, right? Because it happens all the time with referrals, because you can get meetings with people by referral at a level of intimacy, transparency, and urgency that's hard to replicate outside of referral marketing, right? The problem is the capital that's expended by the referral source creates vulnerability, what Teresa was sharing. And if you leverage that vulnerability solely for your own benefit without doing deep discovery and understanding real timelines and real context, you can cause massive damage. And even more importantly, you can miss out on all of the first, second, third, fourth, fifth generation referrals that can come from being a safe driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's interesting, guys, is we can apply really good concepts with good intent, but because we haven't done the homework to find out what the real problem is, we can actually, and again, I like the medical analogy. You could be trying to help somebody, but you can actually hurt them more than you help them. Even if you're using good intent and good general principles, you can hurt them. And that's why it's so important to go deeper. And that's where, Mike, when you said your stuff at the start, that's what I was thinking about, is you're not doing the hard work to actually go find out what, I can't tell you how many clients I've actually corrected their, we've done the work, and then I've come back to them and said, what you told me 2 weeks ago when we first met is not really what you wanted. Here's what you actually want now that we've done the hard work of actually uncovering. Here's what should happen, and here's what you really should want.
Right? You're underscoring, Eric. I profoundly thank you for making this point. And Tina Corner-Stoltz, friend of Mike's, many of you know her, Larry, Tim, her book, Your Seat at the Table, is the center of her methodology for running successful mastermind or peer groups, co-counsels, is the question. And let's keep asking questions. And Eric, to your point, until we know that we're answering the right question, because if we don't follow that line of questioning, the 7 whys, Steve, then we might be answering the wrong question, right? And heck yes. Steve, man, fire away.
Well, I actually happen to have a very personal real life example in the medical world. A few years ago, I was almost dead. And that was after a few years of diagnosis by the medical community of what was wrong with me. And it was totally out to lunch. And that was multiple doctors, multiple therapists, et cetera. So, I mean, the same situation exists with businesses. You got to know what's broken before you start fixing it.
Sorry to hear that, Steve. Very true. We can make assumptions. I have a meeting next week with a business owner. She's excited to meet. You don't usually get someone so excited. So I don't want to make assumptions that I could be wrong. She could want to sell the business tomorrow. She might just want a better lifestyle. I don't want to misdiagnose in my excitement.
Yeah. The one I run into the most, guys, and I'm sure this will resonate with you guys as well when you hear it, is I run into a business owner who says, I just want to get out. And, we start peeling the onion and we start having the discussion. I said, look, if this were fun again, it was fun 20 years ago, right? Yeah, I really enjoyed I enjoyed it 10 years ago. If we could make it fun again, would you really want to get out? I might be fine staying if it could be fun again, right? But they've already written off it can't be fun again because I've tried everything and I can't make it fun, right? And so their answer is, I have to get out. And that might not be the right answer once you get to the root cause of the problem and start solving things. And so helping them understand what the possibilities are and keeping those options open until you really get to that root cause and start understanding, if you're at, sorry for the medical analogies again, if you're at stage 4 incurable cancer, then that's one decision. But if it's really just, you stubbed your toe, that's a whole different end of the spectrum of medical. We can fix that, right?
Heck yeah.
Hey, Eric.
Yes, Mike.
So I love that. You knew I was going to love it. But like, my question for Ed and George, in addition to Eric, because you guys have been doing this a long time, anybody else, feel free to jump on. But like, I concur with Eric so often when I'm working with my niche of financial advisors is they're burnout, they're really, really affluent, and they're going, why the heck does it have to be so bad? And what I find is that they're making decisions about whether to exit the business based upon continuing operating the business the way they used to. And for some of you that have been doing this a long time, what are some of the tips you have to help that burnout business owner where they're kind of telescoped in on, I have to keep doing it this way? How do you help pull them out of that and revision?
I'd start with, this is the area where Tim's methodology of getting people to change and helping them understand that their resistance to change and accepting that some change could be okay is the biggest obstacle generally. I guess my second knee-jerk reaction is there's often some sacred cow that's in there in the mix that, again, you have to peel the onion a couple layers to find out. It's because, I bought the company from my father-in-law and he said I couldn't change this. And you're like, well, okay, I get it, right? But now we got to work through that issue and show how we can fix the problem without breaking. We can fix it without breaking the company, right? And a lot of times they're stuck on the fact that they've tried everything in their toolbox. So since they've exhausted all their ideas, they think there is no solution.
They know what they don't.
Yeah, you often have to just show them, look, I have a special tool in my toolbox that you don't have in your toolbox, and we're going to use that tool and it's going to fix it, right?
And Eric, I'd like to wrap up this point because we're almost at the bottom of the hour and I have a critical question for you guys. But Eric, what you're saying is something that relates throughout C3D, and Larry, say it with me. It's Ed's quote, what got you here might not get you there. Eric, that's a fabulous point. Your status quo may be your limiter. Right? You need to learn some new things. I would not. What if?
Start with that. That's not how you start the conversation. You got to start it. Guys, I learned most of this from watching my dad as a doctor. Honestly, you can't walk in and you don't walk into somebody's room and say, by the way, you're going to die tomorrow. Like, that's not how you present it, right? You walk in and you say, look, we found this, how's this feeling? You ask a lot of questions, you find out where they are emotionally, you find out what, I think the facts, as we were talking about before, Steve and Larry and all of us were talking about gathering the facts, it's equally important to find out the emotional component of it as well, because those are facts. Those are points of where they're at in their journey. You need those factual points just as much as you need the facts of the things to actually act on things. Because if you don't realize that they're emotionally way up here on something and you bring it in like it's a nothing, they're going to explode. And so it's all of that, guys. And that's what makes this so much fun. but it also is what makes it so complex.
It's important information, to your point, Eric. That's information for us to help them.
Yeah.
Close the loop on a couple of points. George, when you started, you held up Tina's book. Majority of times, more times than not, what percent doesn't matter, more times than not, what gets presented first is not the problem that has to be solved. That's why we do this deeper
Correct.
discovery, because then our job, and I think, Steve, you were talking about earlier, the why questions that both are fact-based, emotion-based, that are information supported for us, are going to get us to better pinpoint the root cause of where, or the start point where we might engage them.
Yeah.
So this is great conversation, George.
Fantastic.
Before we end, though, I did put in the chat.
What I was going to bring it to.
Oh, you do it, George, then.
Larry, please fire away. You're the committee.
But there's a committee to help form the summit. Believe it or not, it feels October, first week of October, far away, but it's not.
It's
From
not.
a planning standpoint. And Mike and I, Mike Desiato included, and Anna are all a part of a committee to help George kind of shape the summit, from theme and purpose to learning objectives to how we unfold the week, the topics, and so on. So in that, this is a community effort. We're just the committee to kind of organize what the community wants and needs. So please, Tim Rohde's already done so with me, and thank you, Tim. Provide and on email or pick up the phone, but copy Mike Garrison as well. And because we're meeting next week, George, I don't think you could be there, but we're going to be your ears and eyes to first organize it. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I was going to say, and guys, maybe something you might also do is post it. There is a summit agenda committee thread in the super easy to find. Just put in agenda. Post your idea, because I'd love to see how, you know, how one idea can create another one or cause some refinement that can be really cool. So if you're feeling brave, you don't have to be that brave. It's just us here. I mean, we'll be
Yep.
summit theme, and rather than recap today, if you're willing, anyone who's willing, put your hand up and share one idea, something you'd love to hear, see, take away from the conference. Is that cool? Anybody willing to share? Jump in.
Got it, Eric. Good.
Eric
Case
said
studies.
case studies, and that there will be.
Joe, go.
Looking at being published, I think we all should be published in a niche that we dominate. And that's a great way to advance the growth driver education through our publication.
Heck yes, Joe. I love that. Forbes.
That might be a good panel discussion, because Forbes is okay, but there's other options too.
Right. I'm working with a group right now. It's quite a bit different, but yeah.
Love that, Joe. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm going to jump in and say, I think we ought to try to work on helping the other members understand that single skills do not make a complete service. And so that if you have super strong single skills, you got to collaborate and bring in other people to optimize your success with a given client.
You will never look better to your client than if you bring in someone who's right on point, does what needs to get done, and moves the client to one of those 1,000 points of light, right, to a point of success. Love that, Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just tag along on what Ed said. Maybe just blow out the topic that started this whole discussion this morning, the players that need to be involved and how they fit together and all that sort of thing.
Can I pile on that for 1 sec? Steve, that we have a buddy system this year. I'm challenging everyone who is coming to the summit, and you're all coming, to bring a buddy. Now think about, should it be someone like you or someone you aspire to work with, or an SME you're just introducing to the community? But I'm challenging everyone to bring at least one buddy. And I am working very hard to make sure that we have qualified wealth advisors and qualified traditional CPAs in the room as well, because I think together we are, so thank you, Steve. Go ahead. Sorry, guys.
Very good. All good. Good.
All good.
I do know I have stuff here, Teresa, before we sign off, and I lose that. So you wrote mentorship, which is very big with one of my clients right now. Yep, our community.
He's capturing from the comments that are made.
Yeah, and I'll tell. Okay, paste them.
I would submit not only case studies, but also sharing some. I love when we on this call share an example of an actual thing that happened and walk through again, I would separate it from us all doing a case study together. Here's a general set of circumstances. Let's work through this case study and talk about how we do it. It's also case studies like, George, can you present a case study on how you worked with a team of people and why that was effective and what the results were? Set us up with what was the situation? Why did you do this? And then what were the results, right?
That, Eric. And ideally, one idea might be to have that written up in advance, get it to all the participants, and then so that we can really, Eric, imagine having an hour during which, rather than spending an hour talking about the case, we can give a synopsis at the beginning and then spend the bulk of the time. I mean, so much wisdom in the room.
Well, it's the Q&A after that's the real value. Like, we could all read the case study.
Yeah.
Now it's the interaction. Why did you make this choice, Larry? Why that? What made you think of that? That's what we all want to get into. And the other one that has come up in some other events is something called 5x5x5, which was really a cool idea in the EPI community. Somebody did this in their owner forum. 5 people presenting 5 ideas in 5 minutes each. So you get an idea. Larry, you present an idea. You get 5 minutes to present that idea, and it's almost a mini TED Talk, right? Like, here's an idea, how do you delegate, right? And you present on that idea for 5 minutes and do a mini TED Talk on it. It's just a really powerful way to get some stuff across. And in a 25-minute span, you're getting 5 different ideas. So you get exposed to a lot of different things.
I just typed that into the
That's
comment.
I'm just being sensitive to the time. I want to say this is great input. What has worked well in our community are panel discussions, because there's multiple learning, table discussions, 5x5, case studies, absolutely will be integrated in. What we realize works less well are room presentations. We know all that, and we're going to fit all this in. Steve, he just signed off. Take care. Teresa, thanks for the notes. This is excellent feedback. I'll end by saying we talked about the medical community as a metaphor for some of what we do in our method. In the medical community, they're called poster presentations in case studies. Like here's a case. I could almost picture the room where there are about 5 different poster presentations, and you get time to walk through and learn from those poster presentations. Just the thought of how to create multiple learning opportunities in a short period of time. Thank you.
That, and we have room to do that, guys. So we have more than enough room.
Thanks, everybody.
What a great Klatsch this week. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful. Anything I can do to help, we're here. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Teresa, Ed, Joe,
Teresa,
Larry,
have a
thank
great
you.
day.
Talk soon.
Larry.
This episode is brought to you by the Growth Drive Summit. Our theme this year is building a profitable advisory business. Join us in Charleston, South Carolina, October 6th, 7th, and 8th. Expand your network, learn new skills, and generally have a good time. This is a top-rated event. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you.